Hello.
Hi. Is this on?
It's on. It's on, Farnoosh. So listen, I read your book in the airport lounge
Oh my God.
on one of the 8 million delayed flights that I have taken recently. And I just loved it. I just loved it. I sucked it in. It has a lot of sisterhood with the anxious achiever, and I want to talk about that. Um, but I really felt like I knew you. I felt like I got you. And there's a lot of empathy in the book that I think is really beautiful. So
Thank you.
congrats.
Well, way to make me cry at 1:02 in the afternoon on the East Coast. I haven't cried yet on a podcast, and I'm hoping it doesn't happen. But hey, you know what? I write about it in the book. Like, I'm a big crier.
I'm perimenopausal, so I cry at least
Yes, me
every
too.
hour.
Oh my gosh, is that a sign?
It
Yeah,
is.
so many signs.
Well, listen, you deserve
Thank
it.
you.
So, listeners, I'm here with the incomparable Farnoosh and her new book, A Healthy State of Panic. And we're going to talk about fear today. And we're going to talk about hypervigilance. And we are going to talk about how fear and anxiety can be companions in our life.
Mhm.
So, throw in your questions, and we'll get to them, right? So please just tell us where you're calling from and throw in questions. But I get you first. And so one of the things that I thought was really resonant in your book was your childhood and how
Mhm.
your childhood relationship with anticipatory anxiety and worry and even hypervigilance is a sounds like a big piece of your life and something that you think about, as we all do. And you tell a story when you're a little girl, and you say surviving was single-handedly my job.
Mhm.
I could relate. I was the child of divorced parents who would shuttle me and my sister back and forth and drop us off in various scary spots in the tri-state area, including like Grand Central Station in the
Mhm.
80s, while we had
Oof.
to wait for another parent, one of whom was always late, to show up. And when you wrote that, surviving was single-handedly my job, I got back to that feeling of me as a 10-year-old with my little sister in the middle of the city thinking, survival and protecting my sister is my job.
Mhm.
And that marks who you are as an adult.
Yes, it's sobering. And I don't want every child to have to feel that, but it is our stories. And I have spent 9 years hosting a podcast called So Money. And every time a guest comes on the show, they have been so generous in talking about their moments and often their childhoods that were pivotal and have become important pieces of fabric in their lives today as adults. And this book for me, in some ways, was my payback, my offering, finally turning the table and saying, what were these moments in my personal life that seem to have contributed so much to the person that I became? It's not inconsequential. And yeah, I was a terrified kid. I was called Tarsu, which in Farsi, my parents are Iranian immigrants, means scaredy cat or scared one. And it was usually said mockingly, but as I say in that story, like I look back on that terrified little girl and the vigilance that she had, and sometimes it was very irrational. And I was only 5, so like, give me some
Right.
grace. I would, be afraid of getting kidnapped, and so I would run away from a potential stranger, but then get hit by a car. My fear was blinding to me back then, but I think that the thing that I took with me from my childhood was that yes, I have to be my biggest advocate when fear shows up. It is signaling to me something that I need to protect. And now when fear arrives, I don't use it blindly. I try to use it very constructively and with eyes wide open.
Do you have a little self-talk or dialogue you have when you realize you write, for example, that whenever you see a strange car across the street from your house, you think it's someone bad. Do you have a little bit of dialogue that's like, "You know what? let's chill out a little bit. Like, how do you handle your fear as a grown-up when you know it's lying or being irrational?
Yeah, like when I see a person outside my house taking photographs and I think he is going to home invade
Exactly.
tomorrow and he is getting my routines down and he was a real estate appraiser, Maura. Okay. And I think I have to catch myself in these irrational moments. And what helps me a lot is just taking a minute and first maybe recognizing that I am my mother.
Aren't we all?
That this fear I've inherited it, this particular fear, this skepticism, um, this taking it like this extreme skepticism is something that is kind of like in my DNA, and I don't need to always lean into that.
Right.
And the other thing I do is I research. So when that car was parked outside my house, I also like have to use some logic. I'm like, would a home invader reveal himself in broad daylight with his license plates? Like
Right.
he's probably not up to trouble. And when I Googled it, why is the man outside my house taking photographs? Other people had this fear, right?
Right.
People are like, this happens. And they're like, oh, it's a home appraiser.
Right, because it hits at something that's vulnerable for all of us,
Yeah.
which is our home, our well-being, the people we love live there. Um, at the same time, though, I cheer you on because I remember when the Fearless Girl statue on Wall
Oh, yeah.
Street. First of all, that was such bullshit PR anyway. I had a really difficult time with it, but I thought,
Mm,
why aren't we allowed to be fearless? Every women's conference I ever went to, and I went to a lot, was always like, don't be fearless. Like fear is a bad thing, but you say that actually fear gets a lot of bad PR, and you learn from your fear. And when you listen to your fear, actually your world can open up, not close.
right. And I think what you meant was why are we always told to be why
Well,
can't we be fearful,
why
right?
can't we be fearful? I'm sorry. Why do we
No,
have to be
yeah. I get it. I
fearless?
mix it up myself too a lot. It's because
Thanks, babe.
the word fearless rolls off the tongue a lot more than the word fearful. We don't want to even admit that word exists. We, to your point, have a very unhealthy relationship and toxic relationship with fear where we just think it's like the devil. We think it's evil. We think that if we have it, then that says something bad about us.
Right.
Um, Ever since the days of, I don't know when this campaign started, but I traced it back to at least FDR during the Great Depression when he announced to the country during the Great Depression at his inauguration that you have nothing to fear but fear itself. I thought, isn't that a privilege? Isn't that a luxury to in a global recession to say to people, don't worry, be happy? I think that's disingenuous. And I think that if you are afraid because you don't have a job and you are worried about putting food on the table, that is a real fear.
Yes.
And the opportunity is to say, okay, how can I use this fear to fuel me to go and make a plan, go outside my comfort zone, think strategically. The way I've been doing things hasn't been working. Let's try something new. Let's finally take that risk because I have this fear and I have to kind of get it to work. I got to work through it and I have to find a way to be constructive with it because otherwise it's still going to hang out with you.
Right.
You have to find a way to make that relationship work. Fear is helpful, but it doesn't always know. It doesn't come with a plan.
Mm-mm.
You're the one that has to sort of parse that out. But that is an opportunity that we often don't take because I think our culture is very anti-fear, and I think that message has often been told through the lens of like the privileged few. Like I
Mhm.
just don't think that as a woman of the daughter of immigrants who works in a male dominated industry, that I can just be fearless because what does that mean? That means that I don't have to assess risk, that I can just go do the thing and deal with the consequences later. I can't afford that. I don't want to afford that.
Right.
And I think that's okay.
Right. And you're not saying deny your fear. You're
No.
not saying, like I always joke about anxiety, most of us will do anything to not feel our anxiety, right? We have all our greatest hits to avoid the uncomfortable feelings, but
Right.
you encourage us to feel those uncomfortable feelings and to make a plan.
Yeah, it's whether you're feeling the fear of uncertainty, the fear of failure. I go through 9 different fears throughout the book, the ones that I think we all can relate to, that are universal and that aren't kidding around.
Yeah.
It's not like the fear of heights or the fear of elevators, or like I have a fear of ingesting cilantro. Like, you know, those are everyday fears. There are other sort of visceral fears that show up at high stakes moments, like fear of failure and fear of money. And those are the ones that I wanted to dive into in the book. And in each moment, and I think it's important to sort of be very specific about what is the fear that you're feeling. It's not just fear, it's a fear of what? It's a
Hmm.
fear of failure, rejection, uncertainty, FOMO. When we can get to a more distilled place, I think we can then understand what are the tools to use now, how to actually leverage this fear. And in every chapter, I provide kind of a self inquiry that I recommend when these specific fears show up. So, for example, with the fear of failure, the self inquiry is like, well, as is my definition of success accurate? Is it
Right.
really what I want? Another question you can ask the fear is, you know, am I being sort of set up for failure because I'm not in an environment that is supporting me? And that's scary. And there is validity in that fear because it's telling you you need to go find a community that will support you, that will be supportive, because that's what you want to protect. When you fear failure, you want to support, you want to protect your feeling of achievement, success, support, acceptance sometimes. And so when I know what it is that is at stake, because we've identified the specific fear that we're feeling, then we can very quickly and healthily come up with a plan. And sometimes the plan is, I mean, again, it depends on the fear, but it could be like finding a new job.
Right.
It could mean getting out of a relationship. It could mean starting that business. It could mean asking for more money. It could mean finally addressing your finances. And these are all places where we want to be. And sometimes, surprisingly, fear is the ticket to get there.
One of the inquiries that you pose that I found really resonant for me is, am I running too fast to avoid this fear?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us do that. I know that anxious achievers do that. As long as we keep going and we keep producing and we keep achieving, we're not going to feel the fear. The fear is not going to come get us.
No. Yeah. The fear is faster than you.
The
It
fear
keeps,
is faster. So
it's faster than you know.
what's your recommendation there, or a personal experience of when you realize, gosh, I'm running so fast, I just have to stop and look this fear in the face?
That's it. You don't run. You take a beat. You listen, you stare it in the face, you examine it. And by that, I mean, you examine yourself. Fear is just a tool to turn us more inward, to identify who we are, what our values are. And I think if there's one takeaway from this book that I want everyone to have, that I think is accessible to all of us, is that when fear shows up, and fear shows up in all of us, to not see it as as an excuse to run, to hide, to stop, to turn away, but as an opportunity to use it for all that it's there to be used for, um, to be a catalyst, to go and do something that deep down is going to make you happier. Um, yeah, it's just, that's it. Come for the advice, but stay for the stories.
Well, I want to talk about money. You're obviously best known as a money and personal finance expert. And you have an interview in the book with the amazing Christina Wallace, who's been on The Anxious Achiever a couple times. And, you know, Christina and you talk about the fear to use money as the powerful tool it is,
Mhm.
and the many, many roots of that. And you said this is something I think about. For many years, you thought that being a wealthy woman would come at too great a cost to you, and you were scared to do it. Can you talk about that? I feel like that is a prevalent fear
Yeah.
that a lot of mostly women I know have.
Yeah, you don't often hear men going, "Oh, I don't know if I
No.
wanna be rich."
Exactly.
I think that that has been a destination that more men have been encouraged to pursue, and we see more men pursuing it and achieving it, and, forget rich. How about just, like, financially secure?
Yeah.
That also feels very, unattainable for women because, again, it hasn't been something that we have been told we can do, that we should do, that it is our birthright, and so getting there, again, with the lack of education and the lack of support is frightening, and
But
in
even more, we are told if we become too
Oh,
successful,
yeah.
people won't love us.
Right, right, that
We
it's,
are literally told that.
yeah, we are greedy.
We'll fail the people we love.
It's not virtuous. It's not virtuous. It's not a virtuous pursuit by any stretch. Right, so there's all these, horrible, inaccurate messages that we get. I bought into it. I was a woman who, even as she was a personal finance author and expert and journalist and wrote a book about female breadwinners and wasn't hiding behind the fact that she had financial independence, I wanted this for everybody. I was doing well financially, and I just felt like I didn't want to push the envelope more. I saw a lot of other people in my world, in my career world, in my space, making a lot of money more than me by leveraging digital products, courses,
Mhm.
workshops, things like that. And I was like, I wasn't doing that. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm leaving money on the table. I also saw the amount of work that took. And I didn't want to, in the pursuit of making more money, sacrifice my time, my relationships. And yes, I was worried about how I was going to look, right? Like this woman who seemingly has it all. Now she wants more.
Mhm.
Okay, now she's just being greedy.
Yeah.
Now she's just got her priorities mixed up. And I was worried more about getting this criticism from, truthfully, like family and people who knew me best, who all the while they're supporting me. But I think because they also were attached to these fears, right, around money. Like this is a passed down thing. This is a generational crisis that we have around our relationship with money. And my breakthrough was essentially when I talked to a money coach for work. I
Mhm.
didn't think I needed one, but I sure did.
Tell the story. This is a great story.
So I was speaking with Barbara Stanny, and she is the author of many wonderful books about women and financial empowerment. And I love her. She's like the OG, in women's financial health.
Mm.
And I was interviewing her for an article in Money Magazine, and she and I got to talk about our personal lives a little bit and where I was. And her work was focused mostly on helping women become millionaires. And I wasn't there yet. And I was like, kind of, to me, that was sort of like, oh, I'll never do that. That's not who I am, because those women aren't married, or they never see their kids, or they're unhappy. Like, in my mind, I had already taken myself out of the race.
Mm.
And she said, "But don't you want more power? When you get richer, you become more powerful." And I was like, "Barbara, you are not talking my love language. Like, I don't want power. Ew." And she said, "Okay, let's unpack that, because you have a really curious relationship with this word power." And I said, "Well, because, again, like, I don't want the money because I want to dominate. I don't want to rule. I don't want to be forceful with my money. Like, I think that when you get to be that rich, uh, what is left? Like, I have enough to cover my bases. I have
Mhm.
enough. I feel very fulfilled. Like, I feel like I have enough. Is that okay? Is that fair to say?" She's like, "Yeah, that's fine. Like, it's not about making money to make the money. Like, don't just become a millionaire to become a millionaire. But I would ask this question of you, which is this, you know, I disagree. So I disagree with that definition of power. I think that's one definition of power. I think power has many, many facets and use cases. So, for example, the power to uplift, the power to heal, the power to support. Does that speak to you?" And I said, "Yeah, it does. I want to be able to create generational wealth. I want to be able to invest in my community. I want to be able to be more charitable. Things that I can't do with as much generosity now, because I am not a
Mhm.
millionaire. And she said, all right, well, if that is important to you, then perhaps becoming, crossing the 7-figure threshold is something that you feel like you can and should do. And I said, yeah, that's true. But I still struggled with the fear. I said, but I don't want to do it if it's going to mean giving up all my time and all my relationships. She's like, that again is, doesn't have to be the way that you do it. Does
Mhm.
everybody who makes money and a lot of it sacrifice all those things? And it's not to say that it's going to be easy. There will be trade offs, but your work now as a woman who has come to terms with the fact that she would like to make more money, that it is not shameful, that it is something that can help her not just advance her family, but others. Your work now is to come up with a roadmap to do that while protecting the things that you want to protect. So
Mm.
like you're bringing your fear with you. You're because the fear wanted me to protect my time. It wanted me to protect my energy and my relationships. So I thought about it. I said, well, digital courses are not for is not the way because that's a lot of manpower. That's a lot of
Oh,
like a
yes.
lot of
I'm
planning.
in struggling
You
with that
know,
myself. Oh my goodness.
anybody
Yeah.
watching, it's not easy. But I said, what's the lowest hanging fruit? What can I do immediately? And it was raising my prices.
Right.
Try it. That takes no time. It takes no sacrifice of relationships. It's a decision you make, and then you just let it ride. And I started making more money simply because I asked for it. I did invest in an assistant
Mhm.
which was a risk. I had, but I calculated for it. I was like, well, I was very, like, I had been thinking about the assistant route for a while and I just couldn't justify it. But I said, okay, well, now that I know how much more I want to make, what I'm going to have to do to get there, here is a lot of important work that this person can take on. And I'm going to measure it. We're going to do a trial. We're going to do it for 6 months. And if 6 months isn't fruitful, then we'll part ways. But I wanted to build in some flexibility with that because I didn't want to, again, I wanted to protect. I was afraid of investing too much and then going in over my head.
Right.
It worked out beautifully. And what it allowed me to do was to focus on those bigger, more lucrative business strategies to not do all the sort of executive functioning work in my business, but to then like go out and network, create decks, strategize, think bigger. And within a couple of years, I had doubled my income. Um,
Wow.
and I love that fear got me there. I did it while I was scared, but I was never like, oh, I'm just going to be fearless and just go and like make a course and do the thing. And no, I had to get to a place where I could make a plan that was specific to me, that was catered to me. And I have to include in that not just the things that are going to spark joy, but the things that I'm going to be able to protect along the way. And the only way to identify those things is to get close to your fears.
That's right. And not everything in life sparks joy, right? That's not the
No,
purpose of
no,
life. You know, one of the I have so many questions, but you talk a lot about the fear of uncertainty, and I think that is such a deep underpinning fear for all of us, and it sort of like underpins all the other ones, right?
right.
Including money. And you're saying for someone who you spend your whole job is to answer people's questions, and they want to know, is it going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? And you can't tell them that.
Mm-mm.
How do we instill the spirit of, I don't know, calculated risk or working through fear in people? And this is good for managers to know without telling them that life is a bed of roses and you know for sure things are going to be okay because you don't.
Well, when people ask, is everything going to be okay? I think what they really want to know, which is what they're not asking, is, am I doing everything I can?
Mm,
That's what we want to feel like at the end of the day, right? Because I think we're all logical people to some extent. Like we know that there are just so many things that are out of our control, but we want to feel as though we're doing our best and we're leveraging the resources that we have. And is there something that I'm not thinking of? Is there something that I'm not being vigilant enough about? That's really what the questions are. And so in the end, even if things don't work out, they still kind of did because you arrived at this place feeling like you did everything you can and that's your best. And That's success,
Yeah.
really, at the end of the day. It didn't work out the way you wanted, but when do things ever work out the way we want? We want to just arrive at a place where we feel like we feel whole.
We feel
We feel
whole.
like we did things with integrity. We did things with the best knowledge that we had. And sometimes there are holes there to fill. And that's what the fear is nudging you towards, to fill those holes, fill those gaps. And so when the fear of uncertainty comes around, the self inquiries that I recommend are, what are the resources that I can tap to feel more secure in this moment, which is ultimately what I want to protect. I want to protect my sense of security. It's
Mhm.
the opposite of feeling insecure. So,
Right.
and that's not just like money, right? Sometimes that's people. I lost my job in 2009
Yeah,
in the
you got
recession.
laid off.
Yeah. And talk about uncertainty. Even if you had a job during that time, you felt very uncertain because it was like walking on eggshells every day. The market was tumbling, real estate was collapsing,
Mhm.
jobs were being shed. You thought you were next. And it was uncertain for me because I was also working in the media industry, which was consolidating. Even before that recession, it was already like on its way out in some ways, the traditional ways of getting paid and working. And so I thought, well, what do I do? I mean, is all that's left for me to like go back home and live with my parents until I figure things out? And I realized in that moment that while the world is uncertain and I can't control my employer, I can't go back and beg for my job, although I would have if I knew it would have worked. Um, I realized there are things that are certain still, that are highly resourceful and valuable, which is like my endless ambition, my Rolodex, my years of experience. I had just published a book. That's
Mhm.
an asset. I can
Mhm.
leverage that. And is it going to work out for me overnight? No, but I need to just keep moving. And look, I went under the covers for at least a couple of weeks. Like, I
Yeah.
watched a lot of Bridget Jones' Diary. I ate a lot of dumplings, but and everyone should go through that phase, but the opportunities don't come knocking on your door usually for most people. You have to
Mm.
go out there and find them and create them. And I did that with confidence once I realized the things that were certain in my life.
Mm. I think that, you are someone who, I look up to, I think a lot of people really look up to, and you've created this really interesting, successful life for yourself. But one of the things you write about is that you always felt like an outsider.
Mhm.
You don't you don't move through this world, I think, as a person who's like, "I belong. I fit in. I'm the greatest." Like, how has how has that early experience of being different and not feeling whole, like great in your skin, pushed you to get to this
Mhm.
career place where you've really invented your own rules?
Yeah, I've had an early education in how to read rooms. I was always the new girl in school, and I always went in with high hopes and thought I would come in and just immediately become the most popular girl, because that happened for some people. I started high
Mhm.
school in 10th grade at a new school in a new state, and it was myself and 2 other girls, same day, and the other 2 girls were blonde and blue-eyed and beautiful and athletic and were immediately beloved. I was, like, in awe. I was like, "How is this possible?" And my high school was a tough crowd. It's like the cliques were there. It was done. Like, this is 10th grade. We're not here to make new friends. We
No.
have had these friends since we were in diapers, and, we have tables designated for everybody of every it was like Mean Girls, and somehow these girls just like got I don't know. Maybe if I asked them, they would say I would go home and cry every night, and I didn't feel accepted. But from my purview, like, it was a lot easier for them to get invitations to parties and be get asked out and all the things that you hope for in high school as like a girl and a boy. And so yeah, I was that outsider, but it all worked out, I guess. But I think that for me, what it taught me early was that when you fear rejection, it is really this rallying cry to go where you are loved.
Mm.
That rejection is real. People don't sometimes want you around. Your job is not to try to convince them that you're worthy. Your job is to move on sometimes, it's not to try to make the rejection work. It's or try to, really try to like just tweak and hammer and, desperately try to reverse the rejection. It's to move. And, I laugh about high school and how it was difficult. That was actually the easier chapter in my adolescence. Middle school and elementary school, where I lived in Massachusetts, where I was really the odd one out, because everybody in
Mm.
Massachusetts, in my city, in my town, were, they were Catholic or, blonde, Italian, Irish. Like,
Mhm.
I remember it was third grade and it was "Where are you from" day. And I just got up and told everybody I was Italian because I didn't want the distractions. I
It's just
lied.
easier,
I
just
was like,
easier.
they're not gonna I could see the looks on their faces when my mother would pick me up at school and speak to me in Farsi, or she would begin speaking in her broken English. And there's the ignorance, and it was cutting. And, oh, who when you're 8, 9, I mean, I have a 9-year-old now. I know it's hard. It's not their job right now to try to stick up for
Mm-mm.
an entire ethnicity. You just wanna be asked to the birthday party,
You just wanna eat lunch with people.
right? And so, we moved to Pennsylvania, which was not my choice, but I was so looking forward to it because I was like, "Finally, a fresh start. It can't be as bad as it was in Mass." And yeah, there's always challenges in social settings as an adolescent. High school, it's not easy for anybody
Right.
unless maybe you're like the homecoming queen. But I'm sure she's got problems too.
She has problems.
She's got problems. I've seen all the movies. I wouldn't know from experience. But what was different in Pennsylvania was that I was finally in a school where being smart was considered cool.
Mm.
Being ambitious was encouraged. And it was a smaller school, so you
Mhm.
had an opportunity to shine more and get closer to your teachers and maybe forge deeper relationships. And there were people from all religions, all races, ethnicities, not as much of a monolith, like as a
Mhm.
mono, mm, sort of one. It was more diverse, let's
Yeah.
just say. And I remember I got there and people were giving me nicknames. They thought my name was so cool, which was not the coolest, up until that point. I've tried to change my name so many times up until that point. I was uh, pleasantly surprised. I got there and everybody was like, "Oh, hey, Noosh. Hey, Nooshi." And I'm like, I don't know about that, but I will let you say it because it is, I think, a term of endearment, and it is like, I love it. And I got so confident there. And I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, it was really a metaphor for like when you are in a place where you aren't feeling accepted, sometimes you just got to move. And in that moment in my life, that wasn't something that I pursued proactively. My parents moved and I had to go with them. But it has been a reminder to me that whenever you're in an environment at work, in your own personal life, in your church, in anywhere that you're feeling like this is getting hostile, or this is not, I don't feel trusted, I don't feel accepted, I don't
Right.
feel warmth. Um, your job is to change, not theirs, and not by changing to conform, but by changing by leaving.
That's right. Find the table of the people who wanna talk to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we go, um, is there any word of wisdom or insight that you want to offer someone listening who needs to make a big transition in their life and is really scared to do it?
Well, you're scared? I say, great. Sometimes there's no better place to be. When you're scared, it means it really matters. Like what you're feeling and what you're doing and what you're thinking about is important. You're in the right place, the right mindset. Now, your job is to not let the fear override you. You are the adult in the room. You are the woman with the plan, the man with the plan. So when you are afraid, it's okay to say, I'm afraid. So this must mean I have an opportunity here to explore. I need to either like learn more about this fear and where it came from, get to its truth, realize maybe it isn't still truthful in where I am in
Mm.
my life today. Like we have that privilege, you know. While being fearless is a privilege, um, it's also a privilege to look at the fear and examine it, because from there you will learn things that you may not have uncovered before, that you may not have focused on before, but those are the things, those are the nuggets, the wisdom that you need to go and make those high stakes choices.
Yeah.
And also know that when you're afraid, you're not the only one.
Well, that is true.
Take comfort in that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maura.